In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where the fires of war burn eternal, countless heroes have risen and fallen, their tales etched into the annals of history. Among these, some shine brightly as paragons of loyalty and courage, while others become cautionary tales, examples of what even the most noble souls may endure when the universe's cruel tides pull them under. Captain Demetrian Titus of the Ultramarines was one such figure. His story is one of valor, sacrifice, and a fateful decision that forever altered the trajectory of his destiny. The forge world of Graia, a bastion of technological marvels and ancient secrets, stands as a microcosm of the Imperium of Man, a place where servitors toil endlessly under the watchful gaze of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It has seen its share of conflict, as its strategic importance makes it a prime target for the enemies of mankind. Yet, amidst the cacophony of war, one battle stands out, not for its scale, but for the profound moral dilemmas it forced upon those who fought. Titus, once celebrated as the epitome of an Ultramarine's discipline and honor, found himself at the heart of this crucible. As a captain of the esteemed chapter, he embodied the Codex Astartes, a living example of the wisdom of Robert Guilliman. But even the most steadfast can falter when faced with unrelenting horrors and impossible choices. What unfolded on Graia was not merely a test of skill and strength, but a trial of soul and spirit, pushing Titus to his very limits. The seeds of his transformation were sown in the fires of this conflict, as Graia became the theater of a desperate battle for survival. Forces beyond comprehension clashed over the planet's secrets, each vying for control of ancient technologies that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The defenders of Graia, outnumbered and overwhelmed, looked to Titus as their salvation. His actions during those fateful days would cement his place in history, but not without cost. This tale begins in darkness, as so many stories of the 41st millennium do. It is a story of what it means to be a hero in a universe devoid of mercy. Captain Titus's journey is one of triumph and tragedy, of choices made in the shadow of annihilation, and of the ultimate price paid to protect what he held dear. As we unravel the events that led to his fateful decision, the lines between hero and villain, sacrifice and betrayal will blur, leaving us to ponder. Was Titus a savior? Or did he doom himself and those he sought to protect? With the stage set, we now turn to the key players in this tale, those who shaped Titus's fate and the events on Graia. Through their stories, we glimpse the larger forces at play and the intricate web of loyalties and rivalries that defined this tragic chapter in the Imperium's history. The conflict on Graia drew the attention of many factions, each with its own motives and ambitions. Some sought to defend the Imperium's dominion, while others aimed to exploit the Forge world's invaluable secrets. These factions and their key figures became intertwined in the unfolding chaos, their roles pivotal in shaping the events that would follow. The Adeptus Mechanicus of Graia played a central role in the planet's defense. Known as the Crown of Miracles for its advanced manufactorums, Graia's tech priests viewed themselves as the rightful guardians of sacred technology. At their helm was Archmagos Anval Thon, a calculating figure whose devotion to preserving the Forge world's relics bordered on obsession. The Skitarii legions under his command, enhanced soldiers of flesh and machine, served as Graia's shield, fighting with a mechanical precision that echoed their master's will. Thon was resolute in his belief that the secrets of Graia must never fall into enemy hands, no matter the cost. His unwavering adherence to this cause shaped every tactical decision, making him both an invaluable ally and a potential liability. Alongside the tech priests, the Astra Militarum, or Imperial Guard, deployed several regiments to reinforce Graia's defenses. Chief among them was the 142nd Cadian Shock Troopers, a battle-hardened regiment renowned for their resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. These soldiers brought with them the iron discipline that Cadia instilled in its sons and daughters long before the fall of their home world. Under the command of Colonel Alric Danthus, They fortified key positions across the planet, transforming manufactorums and assembly lines into makeshift bastions. Danthus was a pragmatic leader whose leadership inspired loyalty among his troops. His focus on survival and adaptability often clashed with the Mechanicus's rigid adherence to protocol, but his resourcefulness proved indispensable during the darkest moments of the siege. Another vital presence was the Ordo Xenos, represented by Inquisitor Leora Voss. Sent to investigate reports of xenos infiltration on Graia, Voss's arrival was met with both suspicion and awe. Inquisitors wield unparalleled authority, and her presence signaled that the threat may have extended beyond the known forces of the Imperium's enemies. Voss's mastery of intelligence operations made her a force to be reckoned with, but her methods were as feared as they were effective. Where she walked, secrets unraveled and whispers of purges followed in her wake. Her mere presence served as a reminder that survival alone was not enough. Purity must also be preserved at all costs. The defense of Graia also drew the attention of the Knights of House Tyrannus, an ancient and storied knightly house whose mechanical war machines had long stood as symbols of humanity's defiance. Though few in number, the Imperial Knights they deployed to Graia were titanic figures of war, capable of leveling entire enemy battalions with their arsenal of devastating weaponry. Each knight was piloted by a noble whose lineage traced back to ancient oaths sworn to Terra itself. Their leader, Sir Dacian Arcturos, was known for his unyielding sense of duty and an unwavering belief in the righteousness of his cause. House Tyrannus's involvement was a beacon of hope for Graia's defenders, but their presence also signaled the scale of the threat they faced. Knights were not deployed lightly, and their arrival foreshadowed the storm that was to come. Yet Graia's defenders were not united in purpose. The planet's forge temples housed competing sects of the Adeptus Mechanicus, each with its own interpretations of the Omnissiah's will. These internal divisions, though often subdued by common threats, simmered beneath the surface. Some sects believed that Graia's secrets should be hidden away to prevent their misuse, while others sought to weaponize every scrap of ancient knowledge to annihilate their enemies. This ideological rift created tension among the tech priests and their allies, further complicating their coordination in battle. Beyond the Imperium's forces lay an unseen enemy, concealed within the shadows until the right moment to strike. This elusive force was responsible for sowing chaos on Graia long before the defenders even realized the scope of the threat. The nature and motives of this enemy were shrouded in mystery, adding to the sense of dread that permeated the planet. This adversary's ability to strike from unexpected angles forced the defenders to adopt a defensive posture that strained their resources and morale. In the midst of these factions and figures, Titus's arrival seemed almost incidental at first. He was but one among many sent to bolster Graia's beleaguered defenders, yet his reputation as a capable and disciplined leader preceded him. Unlike the others, however, Titus was not bound to Graia by oaths or duty to the Forge world. His assignment was simple in principle: support the defense, secure key objectives, and maintain the honor of the Ultramarines. But the truth of war is rarely simple, and the lines between duty and destiny blur in the crucible of battle. The pieces were in place, and the stage was set for a conflict that would test the very fabric of loyalty, strategy, and faith. As the defenders of Graia braced themselves for what was to come, none could foresee how this convergence of heroes, war machines, and zealots would culminate in a decision that would resonate far beyond the planet's surface. Each of them, be they mortal, augmented, or encased within titanic armor, would play a role in the unfolding drama, but it was Titus who would stand at the crossroads where honor and sacrifice intersect. Graia's descent into war was not a sudden event, but rather the result of a gradual buildup of tensions, ambitions, and circumstances that converged in devastating fashion. As one of the Imperium's most valuable forge worlds, Graia was a keystone in the war machine of humanity. Its manufactorums produced everything from standard pattern laser guns to rare components for starships and titans. But it wasn't just its production capabilities that drew the eyes of friend and foe alike. It was the ancient technological secrets hidden beneath its surface. Rumors persisted for centuries about vaults buried deep within Graia's crust. These vaults supposedly contained archaeotech remnants from the dark age of technology, devices and blueprints that could tip the balance of power in the Imperium's endless wars. While the Adeptus Mechanicus was officially tasked with safeguarding such discoveries, whispers spread that some among their number had become obsessed with the pursuit of unlocking these forbidden relics. This obsession, in turn, attracted the attention of those who sought to either claim or destroy what they could not control. Graia's troubles began to escalate as reports of disturbances in nearby sectors increased. Supply convoys vanished without trace, entire colonies on fringe worlds were wiped out, and strange transmissions filled with indecipherable static reached the planet's relay stations. The Adeptus Mechanicus dismissed the early signs as anomalies, malfunctions in communication arrays or isolated pirate raids. However, their dismissal proved costly when a full-scale invasion began to materialize. The first confirmed attacks struck the orbital defense platforms surrounding Graia. Enemy vessels emerged from the void, bypassing the primary patrol routes. By the time the Mechanicus and Imperial Navy attempted to organize a counter-response, multiple stations had already been reduced to debris. The rapid collapse of orbital defenses left the surface of Graia vulnerable. With enemy forces pouring into the system, it became clear that this was no random strike. It was a calculated assault. Despite the immediate confusion, several factors indicated that this was not the work of a single faction. Coordinated attacks were carried out on different continents simultaneously, targeting manufactorums, power grids, and key forges. This strategy suggested a broader conspiracy, one that aimed not just at seizing resources, but at crippling the planet entirely. Graia's defenders scrambled to adapt to an enemy that seemed to know their weaknesses and exploited them with ruthless precision. Compounding the crisis was the Adeptus Mechanicus's internal fragmentation. Their focus on maintaining the sanctity of their relics above all else hindered swift cooperation with their allies. The tech priests were reluctant to deviate from their protocols even as the enemy closed in. For them, preserving sacred machines was paramount, even if it meant sacrificing lives. This rigid mindset slowed their ability to mobilize effectively, forcing Graia's defenders into a defensive posture before they could mount a coordinated counterattack. What made the situation even more dire was the strategic importance of Graia within the region. As a primary hub for munitions and military supplies, the loss of the Forge world would leave entire Imperial sectors vulnerable. The chain reaction from such a loss would ripple outward, potentially leading to the collapse of nearby war fronts. The Adeptus Administratum understood this all too well, issuing urgent orders for reinforcements to be deployed at any cost. However, the vast distances of the galaxy meant that any meaningful reinforcements would take precious time to arrive, time that Graia did not have. The escalation of this conflict was further complicated by suspicions that heretical elements had infiltrated Graia itself. Long before the war began, there were hushed accusations of Mechanicus splinter groups conducting experiments forbidden by Imperial doctrine. These groups were rumored to be delving into secrets that should have remained buried. The fear that rogue tech priests might have been compromised or subverted led to growing distrust between factions. Whether or not these accusations were true, the seeds of paranoia were sown, weakening Graia's already fragile unity. As the battle for Graia loomed, the forces of the Imperium understood that they were not merely fighting to protect a Forge world, they were fighting to safeguard the very fabric of their war machine. If Graia fell, the devastation would be incalculable. Yet, despite this shared understanding, the defenders were caught in a whirlwind of conflicting priorities. The Astra Militarum focused on fortifying defensive positions, the Mechanicus obsessed over their relics, and the Inquisition probed for signs of treachery. The resulting disarray left them vulnerable, and the enemy pressed its advantage with relentless force. In the wider context of the Imperium's history, The war for Graia became yet another chapter in the ongoing saga of humanity's desperate fight for survival. However, for those who fought on its surface, it was more than a battle. It was a test of loyalty, sacrifice, and resolve. The storm that broke over Graia was not merely a consequence of external aggression, but of long-standing vulnerabilities that had festered beneath the surface. When war came, it was not a distant threat. It was a reckoning centuries in the making. This confluence of ambition, fear, and mistrust created the perfect storm that would engulf Graia in one of the most harrowing conflicts it had ever faced. The defenders prepared for a siege they knew would push them to the breaking point, yet even in their grim determination, few could foresee the true scale of what awaited them. In this crucible, decisions made in the heat of battle would shape not only the fate of the Forge world, but the lives of those who had sworn to protect it at any cost. When Captain Demetrian Titus arrived on Graia, the situation was already dire. The skies above the Forge world burned as void ships clashed in orbit, and the surface was scarred by relentless artillery bombardments. Titus and his ultramarine detachment descended into a war zone where chaos and desperation reigned. The initial mission was clear: secure key defensive positions, stabilize crumbling fronts, and buy time for reinforcements. Yet as the battle evolved, so too did Titus's role in ways no one could have foreseen. Upon landing near the primary manufactorum district, Titus immediately assessed the disarray among the defenders. The Skitaria units held their lines with mechanical precision, but the human elements of the defense force faltered under the immense pressure of wave after wave of enemy assaults. Recognizing the need for leadership on the ground, Titus split his forces into rapid strike squads, coordinating with the surviving commanders of the Astra Militarum and Tech Priests. His strategy emphasized mobility and precision, aiming to outmaneuver the enemy and fortify weakened defensive choke points before they collapsed entirely. One of the earliest pivotal engagements came when the enemy attempted to breach the Omniscian Spire, a colossal communications relay critical for maintaining contact with Imperial Command. The assault began with coordinated bombardments, followed by an overwhelming infantry advance. Titus personally led a countercharge, his power sword cutting through enemy ranks as bolters roared in unison around him. The sheer ferocity of the Ultramarines' counterattack drove the invaders back, preventing the total loss of the relay. However, Titus knew that this victory was fleeting. Every success only delayed the inevitable tide that threatened to engulf Graia. The battle shifted again when the enemy turned their focus toward the plasma generators that powered the planet's defense grid. If the generators fell, the void shields protecting Graia's last strongholds would collapse, leaving critical installations vulnerable to orbital strikes. Titus ordered a tactical withdrawal from lesser outposts to reinforce the defense of the generator complexes. This maneuver was fraught with risk. Retreating units were exposed to ambushes and encirclement. Yet under Titus's command, the Ultramarines executed the operation with precision, re-establishing defensive perimeters before the enemy could capitalize on the withdrawals. During this phase of the conflict, Titus displayed remarkable adaptability. When the Mechanicus leaders hesitated to abandon smaller manufactorums, fearing the loss of sacred relics, Titus negotiated a compromise, directing his forces to evacuate key technological artifacts while still prioritizing defensive operations. This move strengthened the alliance between the Ultramarines and the Mechanicus, ensuring more cohesive coordination in the coming battles. However, such victories came at a cost. The relentless nature of the fighting began to wear down even the gene-forged warriors of the Ultramarines. Supply lines were strained, ammunition ran low, and casualties mounted. As the battle dragged on, Titus began to suspect that the enemy's primary goal was not merely to conquer Graia, but to seize something buried deep within the planet. This suspicion grew when his squads intercepted encrypted Vox transmissions referencing unknown coordinates within the lower manufactorum levels. Driven by a sense of duty and the need to understand the full scope of the enemy's plan, Titus organized an exploratory strike force to investigate these coordinates. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. A massive sealed vault marked with Mechanicus sigils, older than most records of the Forge world itself. Despite the increasing intensity of the siege, Titus remained steadfast in his commitment to lead from the front. His presence on the battlefield became a rallying point for the defenders of Graia. Time and again, he was seen at the forefront of counterattacks, his voice cutting through the static of war as he issued commands and inspired those under his command. In one of the bloodiest confrontations, Titus and a small vanguard of ultramarines held a critical bridge leading to the heart of the Manufactorum district. Outnumbered 10-1, they held the line until reinforcements arrived, buying precious time for wounded soldiers and civilians to evacuate. However, the deeper Titus delved into the unfolding conflict, the more isolated he became. The Skitarii fought with machine-like precision, but without the intuition that Titus relied on in battle. The Astra Militarum regiments were brave but mortal, susceptible to fear and exhaustion. Even the tech priests' motivations often conflicted with the immediate necessities of war. Titus bore the weight of these conflicting priorities alone, his mind racing with strategies to counter an enemy that seemed always one step ahead. The turning point in his journey began to take shape when Titus uncovered further evidence of treachery. His suspicions were confirmed when he encountered a covert strike force attempting to breach the ancient vault. Though the attackers bore the guise of Imperial soldiers, their actions betrayed a more sinister allegiance. The skirmish was brutal, and though victorious, Titus was left with grim knowledge. The war for Graia was not only against an external enemy, but against forces that sought to unravel the Imperium from within. The strain of constant battle, the weight of command, and the growing realization of betrayal took their toll on Titus, yet he refused to waver. His every decision was made with the singular purpose of protecting Graia, even as the cost grew higher. Those who fought alongside him began to see him as more than just a commander. They saw a man willing to sacrifice everything to prevent the Forge world's fall. But the true cost of his resolve had yet to be revealed as the final days of the siege approached, and Titus stood on the precipice of a choice that would define his legacy forever. The final confrontation for Graia was unlike any battle that had come before. The enemy's relentless siege culminated in a concentrated assault aimed at the planet's heart, the ancient vault discovered beneath the deepest manufactorums. The skies bled with fire as orbital bombardments shattered defensive lines, and the Forge world's once thrumming factories now lay silent under the weight of devastation. Amid the chaos, Captain Demetrian Titus prepared for what he knew would be the defining moment of the war. With the last strongholds crumbling, the vault had become both a sanctuary and a target. Whatever secrets lay within its sealed walls, they were valuable enough for the enemy to throw every resource at breaching it. Titus, battered and scarred from weeks of unending combat, led the final defense with the remnants of his company. The tech priests of Graia, desperate to protect their sacred relics, joined in a desperate gambit to repel the invaders. The defenders stood shoulder to shoulder in the claustrophobic tunnels beneath the Manufactorum as wave after wave of attackers poured in, their sheer numbers threatening to drown the defenders in a tide of blood and steel. The battle reached its crescendo when the enemy unleashed a monstrous siege engine, an amalgamation of corrupted technology and dark sorcery. The beast tore through bulkheads and barricades, its presence a palpable weight that filled the vault with a suffocating aura of dread. Every defensive measure failed to halt its advance. The Ultramarines fought with unmatched courage, their bolters singing in defiance, but it became clear that no conventional force could withstand such devastation. As the siege engine tore through the final defensive line, Titus found himself at the threshold of the vault's inner sanctum, where ancient machinery pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic hum. It was there that Titus faced his moment of reckoning. The archway of the sanctum flickered with unnatural light, and from the depths of the vault, a presence stirred, something ancient bound by the mechanisms of the past. The tech priests had long whispered of forbidden intelligences hidden away in Graia's depths, and now Titus stood before one such force. As the walls shook with the fury of the siege outside, the entity's voice reached into Titus's mind, offering him a grim bargain, the power to destroy the enemy and save Graia, but at the cost of his soul. Titus understood the stakes. He had witnessed countless sacrifices made in the name of survival, but this was different. This choice was his alone to bear, a decision that defied the teachings of the Codex and everything he had once believed. Yet as he gazed upon the broken remnants of his warriors and the terrified Mechanicus adepts cowering behind them, he knew there was no other way. The price was steep, but the alternative was annihilation. In a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, Titus accepted the pact. A surge of energy coursed through him, far beyond anything the flesh and blood of a mortal could endure. His senses expanded as if he could see the threads of fate woven around the battlefield. Time itself seemed to slow as the walls of the vault shimmered with power. The siege engine barreling toward the sanctum faltered, its metallic limbs convulsing as waves of energy tore through its corrupted frame. The invaders, emboldened by their impending victory, were consumed in a cataclysmic pulse of light that erupted from Titus like a star going supernova. When the brilliance subsided, silence blanketed the battlefield. The enemy's forces had been annihilated, their remnants scattered as ash across the desolate halls. The vault's integrity remained intact, and Graia was saved from destruction. Yet the cost of this salvation became immediately apparent. Titus stood alone amid the wreckage, his armor scorched and crackling with residual energy. The familiar blue and gold of the Ultramarines was marred by darkened veins of searing crimson, and an unsettling glow burned within his eyes. His brothers, who had fought by his side through countless campaigns, looked upon him now with a mixture of awe and fear. Titus spoke, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance as he commanded the remaining forces to regroup and secure the manufactorums. Yet even as he moved with purpose, it was clear that he had become something unrecognizable. The burden of the pact weighed heavily upon him, and though the battle was won, whispers of doubt and dread spread among those who survived. The Mechanicus, ever pragmatic, remained silent on the nature of what had transpired, knowing that delving too deeply into the truth would invite their own ruin. The Astra Militarum troops, already accustomed to witnessing the horrors of war, chose instead to focus on their survival and the victory at hand. For Titus, the aftermath of his choice was both immediate and eternal. He had saved Graia, yet in doing so, he had crossed a line from which there could be no return. The Ultramarines were paragons of duty and honor, but Titus had defied the very principles that defined their legacy. He knew that the Inquisition would seek answers, that his actions would be scrutinized and judged in the cold halls of power. But at that moment, standing amidst the ruins of a battle hard won, Titus's thoughts were not of judgment or consequence. He had done what was necessary to preserve the lives entrusted to his command. As the surviving defenders regrouped, securing what remained of the Forge world, they whispered of the captain who had defied fate to save them. Yet there was no celebration, no triumphant march through the manufactorums. There was only the eerie stillness of a battlefield where something more than mortal will had intervened. Titus knew that his soul had been marked, bound to the power that had spared Graia from annihilation. The echoes of that bargain would haunt him long after the fires of war had cooled. The siege of Graia had ended, but the cost of victory had reshaped everything. For Demetrian Titus, salvation had come at the ultimate price, a sacrifice that would not be forgotten, even as his name became a legend whispered with reverence and fear. The vault remained sealed, the secrets within preserved for another age, but the legacy of that day would cast a long shadow over all who had witnessed it. The aftermath of the battle for Graia rippled far beyond the Forge world itself, sending shock waves through the Imperium. Although the planet had been saved from annihilation, the victory came shrouded in a cloud of uncertainty and fear. The manufactorums resumed their relentless production, feeding the war machine of humanity once more, but whispers about the events beneath the surface spread like wildfire. The name of Captain Demetrian Titus became both a rallying cry and a grim reminder of the cost of survival. Graia's salvation ensured that vital supply lines to the war fronts remained intact, preventing entire sectors from falling to the enemies of the Imperium. The victory restored much-needed stability to a region that had been teetering on the brink of collapse. Reinforcements and munitions from Graia continued to bolster the beleaguered forces in nearby systems, turning the tide of battles that had seemed all but lost. For many, the preservation of the Forge world was proof that even in the darkest moments, humanity could endure against overwhelming odds. However, not all viewed the events on Graia as a triumph. Among the higher echelons of the Imperium, troubling questions began to surface. Reports from surviving officers were incomplete, and many contained conflicting accounts of what had occurred in the depths of the vault. The Inquisition, always vigilant against any deviation from purity, launched an extensive investigation. Inquisitor Leora Voss, who had fought alongside the Defenders, submitted a formal report, but much of it was classified or redacted. What little information reached the wider Imperium suggested that something unnatural had occurred, a disruption in the natural order that could not be explained through conventional means. The Adeptus Mechanicus, for their part, were silent on the matter. To the tech priests of Graia, the outcome of the war was a testament to their resilience and the sanctity of their forge. Yet behind their carefully crafted veneer of triumph lay unease. They had witnessed something that defied even their understanding of ancient technologies and machine spirits. Some among them whispered that the entity within the vault had been awakened, though few dared to speak such heresy aloud. For the more radical sects of the Mechanicus, the incident represented an opportunity, a tantalizing glimpse of a power long forgotten. Others saw it as a dire warning of the dangers that lurked in the hidden recesses of their Forge worlds. For the Ultramarines chapter, the loss of Titus was a wound that would not heal easily. He had been a decorated captain, a leader who had exemplified their ideals. His actions on Graia left the chapter in a precarious position. They could not deny the tactical genius that had saved the Forge world, yet they could not condone the methods by which the victory had been achieved. The chapter's leadership convened in a somber conclave to determine how Titus's legacy should be remembered. To honor him as a hero might risk legitimizing his final controversial choice, while condemning him outright could demoralize the battle brothers who had served under him and bore witness to his courage. The Inquisition's scrutiny placed the Ultramarines in an even more difficult position. There were murmurs of deeper investigations, whispers of potential purges, and the looming threat of censure. The chapter's librarians scoured ancient records in an attempt to find precedent for such an event, but the truth was unprecedented. No Ultramarine had ever faced a fate quite like Titus's. In the end, the chapter chose silence over spectacle, quietly marking his name in the annals of their history while withholding the full details of his fate from the wider Imperium. For the average citizens of the Imperium, the story of Graia became a symbol of the sacrifices made in humanity's defense. Though few knew the full truth, they clung to the idea that even in the face of unspeakable horrors, champions of humanity would rise to protect them. Military commanders across multiple war zones cited Graia as proof that victories could still be won, even against overwhelming odds. The morale boost in some sectors was significant, preventing widespread panic during critical campaigns. However, in hushed gatherings and among the more cynical, there was unease, a growing sense that not all victories came without consequence. The war for Graia also reignited long-standing debates within the Ordo Malleus and Ordo Xenos regarding the use of extraordinary measures to combat extraordinary threats. Some inquisitors argued that Titus's sacrifice, while unorthodox, had been justified given the scale of the threat. Others viewed it as a dangerous precedent that could erode the Imperium's strict doctrine. If one man could barter with forces beyond mortal comprehension, and be hailed as a hero, what would stop others from doing the same in the name of survival? The ideological divide widened, with factions within the Inquisition scrutinizing not only Titus's actions, but the leadership of the Ultramarines and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Graia itself remained a fortress world, its forges blazing once more as tanks, weapons, and starship components flowed from its manufactorums. Yet the planet bore scars both physical and metaphysical. The lower manufactorum levels where the final battle had taken place were sealed off, deemed too dangerous to access. Rumors persisted of strange occurrences, mechanical systems malfunctioning without cause, Vox signals broadcasting fragmented messages in dead languages, and servitors experiencing inexplicable shutdowns. The Adeptus Mechanicus dismissed these incidents as anomalies, but the fear among the lower ranks was palpable. Few dared to speak openly about what they believed had truly happened beneath the planet's surface. For Demetrian Titus himself, the question of salvation or damnation remained unanswered. Though he had vanished from the battlefield after the final pulse of energy, his story did not end there. Rumors of a figure clad in scorched ultramarine armor spread across distant war zones. Some spoke of an avenging warrior who appeared in the darkest hours, turning the tide of hopeless battles before disappearing without a word. Others dismissed these tales as mere myth, another legend born from the desperate imaginations of soldiers clinging to hope. But for those who had stood with Titus on Graia, the memory of his sacrifice and transformation was as real as the blood on their hands. In the end, the war for Graia was remembered as a grim victory, one that reinforced both the resilience and fragility of the Imperium. The Forge World's survival ensured that humanity's wars could continue, but the cost of that survival raised questions that would echo through the galaxy for centuries. The name of Captain Demetrian Titus became a symbol of the fine line between heroism and damnation, a legacy both feared and revered. His soul may have been the price paid to save Graia, but the consequences of that bargain would be felt long after the last bolt shell was fired. The tale of Captain Demetrian Titus has become a focal point of speculation and debate within the Warhammer community, not just because of his actions, but due to the unique circumstances surrounding his transformation and the implications of what truly transpired. Fans continue to dissect every fragment of lore related to Graia and Titus's fate, piecing together theories about what exactly occurred in the heart of the vault and the nature of the force that changed him forever. One of the most frequently discussed aspects is the entity that offered Titus the power to save Graia. The exact nature of this force remains shrouded in mystery, fueling endless debates. Some argue that it was a fragment of an ancient artificial intelligence, a remnant from the dark age of technology, sealed away by the early Adeptus Mechanicus out of fear. Others believe it was a manifestation of the Emperor's will, though this theory is contested due to the ominous nature of the transformation Titus underwent. The lack of any formal classification within the existing imperial records leaves the truth tantalizingly out of reach, making it one of the most compelling unsolved questions among lore enthusiasts. Another intriguing aspect is the nature of the pact itself. Titus's willingness to barter his soul for victory is unusual for an ultramarine, whose adherence to discipline and doctrine is considered unbreakable. Fans often debate whether Titus acted out of desperation or if he had a deeper understanding of the stakes at play. Was his choice a moment of weakness, or was it an act of ultimate sacrifice beyond the comprehension of even his brothers? Some theorize that his knowledge of the vault's history gave him insight into what was required to protect Graia, suggesting that his decision was made with grim resolve rather than fear or desperation. The vault itself remains a significant point of interest. Its structure and the Mechanicus sigils etched into its walls suggest that it was not merely a storage facility, but something far older and more significant. Some fans speculate that the vault was a containment chamber designed to imprison whatever force Titus encountered. If this is true, it raises disturbing questions about the Mechanicus' understanding, or lack thereof, of their own relics. Was the entity offering salvation truly a prisoner, or was it something designed to be safeguarded for a future crisis? The lack of definitive answers fuels countless discussions, with some even positing that the vault was never meant to be opened in the first place, making Titus's intervention a catastrophic deviation from ancient warnings. A recurring point of fascination is the visual depiction of Titus after the transformation. Fan art, discussion boards, and lore channels often reference the descriptions of his armor, which is said to have retained the general form of ultramarine plate, but became twisted by unknown energies. The crimson veins that pulsed across the ceramite, combined with the glowing symbols that emerged on his gauntlets and chest plate, have led to comparisons with both Mechanicus Techno-Arcana and the effects of corrupted xenos relics. This has sparked debate about whether Titus's transformation was permanent or if it was a temporary manifestation of the entity's influence. The symbolic shift in his armor has become a visual shorthand for his tragic fate in fan communities, representing the thin line between a savior and a cautionary tale. Another popular discussion revolves around Titus's potential survival beyond the events of Graia. The mysterious sightings of a lone warrior clad in scorched ultramarine plate have led to conflicting interpretations. Some believe these accounts confirm that Titus still walks the war-torn galaxy as a revenant figure, bound to some unholy mission. Others see these stories as fabrications born from soldiers desperate for hope or vengeance. Fanfiction, artwork, and tabletop campaigns often incorporate this figure, presenting Titus as a tragic anti-hero who appears in the galaxy's darkest moments, wielding forbidden power against humanity's enemies, but never remaining long enough to be questioned or revered. One of the most hotly debated topics is the ethical dilemma posed by Titus's choice. Some fans argue that his actions were justified, given the dire circumstances. They see Titus as a martyr who sacrificed his purity to save millions, embodying a rare form of heroism that transcends the rigid dogma of the Imperium. Others, however, view him as a cautionary figure who succumbed to hubris, believing that he alone could shoulder the burden of such a bargain without consequence. This divide has led to philosophical discussions about the nature of sacrifice and the cost of victory, with some drawing parallels between Titus and other tragic figures in the Warhammer universe who made similar compromises. Lastly, the concept of forbidden knowledge plays a significant role in the ongoing fascination with Titus's story. The Imperium is built on a foundation of ignorance disguised as faith, where knowledge itself is often treated as a threat. Titus's exposure to whatever force lay within the vault challenges this fundamental principle, prompting discussions about whether certain truths are worth the risk. Was Titus's sacrifice proof that humanity must evolve its understanding of the cosmos to survive? Or was it a stark reminder that even the noblest intentions can lead to ruin when forbidden powers are invoked? In the end, the story of Captain Demetrian Titus has endured in the Warhammer community, not just because of its tragedy, but because of its ambiguity. The unanswered questions surrounding his transformation, the nature of the entity, and the cost of Graia's salvation keep the conversation alive. His tale serves as a reminder of the narrative depth of the Warhammer universe, a place where even the brightest heroes can be engulfed by shadow and where victory and defeat are often indistinguishable from one another. The defenders of Graia were composed of individuals whose fates were irrevocably shaped by the battle for the Forge world. While the legend of Captain Demetrian Titus looms largest in the public consciousness, those who fought alongside him played crucial roles in the unfolding events. Each of these figures carried their own burdens of loyalty, ambition, and sacrifice, and their strengths and flaws defined the outcome as much as the captain's ultimate choice. Archmagos Anval Thawne was an imposing figure among the Adeptus Mechanicus, not just for his towering frame augmented by cybernetic enhancements, but for his relentless pursuit of knowledge and control. Thawne was a master of defensive strategy and an uncompromising guardian of Graia's technological relics. His devotion to the Omnissiah bordered on zealotry, driving him to make decisions that often dismissed human cost in favor of safeguarding sacred machines. Thawne's great strength was his strategic mind and ability to manage vast resources, deploying Skitarii cohorts with precision. Yet his rigid adherence to doctrine became a double-edged sword. When the war demanded adaptive, unconventional tactics, Thawne's refusal to deviate from protocol cost precious time and lives. Despite these flaws, his legacy remains intertwined with Graia's survival. In the aftermath of the conflict, Thawne was praised by some for his unwavering faith and condemned by others for his inability to compromise when it mattered most. Colonel Alric Danthus of the Astra Militarum represented a different kind of resilience. A veteran of countless engagements, Danthus understood that wars were not won by glory or blind zeal, but by pragmatism and the sheer will to endure. His soldiers respected him not because he was charismatic or heroic in the traditional sense, but because he stood with them through the worst of the fighting. Danthus's greatest strength was his ability to inspire loyalty through his presence on the front lines. When morale wavered, he was there, leading charges and holding trenches alongside his troops. However, his pragmatism often put him at odds with the more rigid commanders of the Mechanicus. Danthus believed in preserving his soldiers' lives over maintaining static defenses, which led to heated disputes during the early days of the siege. His methods, though effective, were viewed by some as insubordination. Despite these conflicts, his leadership saved thousands of lives. Yet the war took its toll on him, physically and mentally. After the battle for Graia, Danthus was a shadow of the man he had been, his once unbreakable resolve cracked by the weight of the sacrifices he had been forced to make. Inquisitor Leora Voss of the Ordo Xenos was a figure of both fear and fascination. Her reputation preceded her, and her mere presence was enough to unnerve even hardened commanders. Voss was an expert in identifying and eliminating alien influences, and she carried an aura of ruthless efficiency that made her both respected and despised. Her greatest strength was her intellect, her ability to unravel enemy plans and see through deception with surgical precision. However, Voss was also known for her extreme measures. She was willing to order purges of entire divisions if she suspected corruption or weakness, a trait that isolated her from potential allies. On Graia, Voss's uncompromising nature proved both a blessing and a curse. She uncovered critical enemy infiltrations that could have doomed the planet, but her cold demeanor alienated those who sought her guidance. In the aftermath of Titus's transformation, Voss was among the first to question the true nature of what had transpired. Yet even she could not piece together the entirety of the puzzle. Her fate after the war remains a point of debate. Some sources suggest she vanished on a mission to pursue traces of whatever force Titus encountered, while others claim she was silenced by her own order to prevent further inquiry. Sir Dacian Arcturos of House Tyrannus was a symbol of knightly valor and duty. Piloting the colossal war machine Glory of Cerastus Arcturos and his fellow knights provided a critical bulwark during the heaviest enemy offensives. Arcturos exemplified the ancient traditions of his house, embodying honor and chivalry even in the face of technological monstrosities and overwhelming firepower. His unwavering belief in the righteousness of his cause was both his greatest strength and his greatest flaw. While his presence on the battlefield inspired those around him, it also blinded him to the more complex realities of the war. Arcturos viewed the conflict in terms of absolutes, victory or death, honor or disgrace. This inflexible worldview led to moments of tactical misjudgment, such as when he led an ill-fated charge against an enemy stronghold without waiting for reinforcement. Despite this, Arcturos's sacrifices and the destruction wrought by his night engine played a significant role in delaying the enemy advance, giving Titus and the defenders the time they needed to secure the vault. Arcturos perished in the final days of the siege, but his name is remembered in the solemn halls of his house, where his deeds are recounted as a testament to unbreakable courage. Even among the lower ranks, there were those whose actions had an outsized impact on the defense of Graia. The Skitarii Alpha designated Theta 117 became known for his uncanny ability to adapt to shifting battlefield conditions despite his machine-forged obedience to the orders of his superiors. Theta 117's squads were often deployed to the most volatile zones, where his keen sense for ambushes and flanking maneuvers saved numerous manufactorum districts from being overrun. His stoic efficiency made him a living symbol of Mechanicus resilience, but it also raised questions about his uncharacteristic intuition. Some speculated that his data feed had been altered by something beyond human understanding during the war. Theta 117's fate after the siege remains classified, adding to the speculation about his true nature. These individuals, each driven by their own beliefs and burdens, shaped the battle for Graia as much as Titus himself. Some sought redemption, others sought glory, and a few simply sought to survive. Their strengths held the line when all seemed lost, but their weaknesses exposed the cracks that would lead to impossible decisions. The aftermath of their efforts left an indelible mark, not only on the planet they fought to save, but on the Imperium's collective memory. Their legacies, though overshadowed by the tragedy of Titus, remind the Imperium that war is not fought by singular heroes, but by the countless souls whose choices define victory or annihilation. The story of Captain Demetrian Titus's sacrifice has spawned a myriad of unresolved questions and speculative theories that continue to captivate and divide those who study the events of Graia. At its core lies a mystery that challenges the very foundations of imperial doctrine, leaving room for interpretations that range from somber cautionary tales to outright heretical musings. One of the most hotly debated questions is the true nature of the force that Titus encountered in the vault. Official accounts remain vague, with records heavily redacted by the Inquisition and conflicting testimony from surviving witnesses. Some scholars within the Adeptus Mechanicus argue that the entity could have been a fragment of a machine intelligence from the dark age of technology, one designed to safeguard critical installations in times of extreme crisis. Supporters of this theory point to the entity's apparent control over energy and its ability to manipulate the battlefield through technological means, suggesting a defense protocol rather than a malevolent force. However, others counter that no mere machine, however advanced, would require a bargain involving a mortal soul, a notion that defies the cold logic of technology. Another theory suggests that the vault housed an ancient warp-related construct designed as a trap or prison. Those who adhere to this idea argue that the vault's containment protocols and the strange fluctuations reported in the surrounding area bear the hallmarks of devices used by early human civilizations to isolate entities tied to the immaterium. According to this interpretation, Titus's interaction with the entity may have unintentionally broken a containment seal, releasing something that had remained dormant for millennia. This theory implies that the price Titus paid was not simply a personal sacrifice, but the beginning of a much larger and more insidious threat, one that could surface again. The fate of Titus himself also fuels speculation. Official imperial records claim that Titus perished during the final moments of the battle, though no remains were ever recovered. This absence has given rise to countless stories of a lone warrior clad in damaged ultramarine armor appearing on distant battlefields. Some believe these tales to be exaggerated accounts or fabrications by soldiers eager to believe in a hero's enduring legacy. Others posit that Titus may have survived but was irrevocably changed, existing somewhere between life and death, bound to a purpose that neither the living nor the dead can comprehend. If true, the implications are staggering, suggesting that his story is far from over. There are also questions surrounding the true intentions of the Adeptus Mechanicus during the battle. Some within the Imperial command structure have suggested that the Mechanicus knew more about the vault than they admitted, deliberately withholding key information from their allies. If the vault indeed contained something capable of influencing the outcome of an entire planetary siege, why had it remained sealed for so long, and why were there no formal records of its existence? Skeptics argue that the Mechanicus may have viewed the vault as a failsafe of last resort, one they were willing to use regardless of the risks. This theory raises uncomfortable questions about the Mechanicus' obsession with ancient technology and whether they can be trusted to wield the power they seek. Another controversial topic involves the Inquisition's response to the aftermath of Graia's siege. Inquisitor Leora Voss's abrupt disappearance after submitting her initial report has led to speculation that she may have uncovered truths too dangerous to be made public. Was she silenced by her superiors, or did she choose to vanish in pursuit of answers that defied the Imperium's rigid dogma? The lack of further communication from her has left a void filled by rumors, with some claiming that Voss encountered remnants of the same force on another world and was consumed by her obsession, while others believe she left behind encoded messages hinting at the vault's true nature. The philosophical implications of Titus's choice have also sparked enduring debates within the wider Imperium. Many view him as a tragic figure, a loyal servant of the Emperor who made the ultimate sacrifice to preserve countless lives. However, some radical sects within the Inquisition see Titus as a dangerous example of moral compromise, a precedent that could embolden others to seek forbidden powers in moments of desperation. This debate touches upon a fundamental question that has haunted humanity since the Great Crusade. Can victory at any cost truly be considered victory? Was Titus's decision an act of faith in the Emperor's grand design, or a tragic misstep that violated the sacred principles upon which the Imperium stands? One particularly fringe theory posits that Titus's soul may not have been destroyed, but absorbed or transformed by the entity within the vault. Proponents of this theory believe that Titus could be tethered to the Forge world itself, his consciousness bound to Graia's machinery and data cores. They cite reports of strange, untraceable Vox signals following the battle, fragments of a voice giving cryptic warnings and issuing tactical insights during subsequent conflicts on the planet. Though dismissed as superstitious nonsense by most, the timing of these reports has led some to wonder if Titus has become something akin to a machine spirit, forever watching over the Forge world he died to protect. The question of what became of the vault itself also remains unanswered. Following the battle, the lower manufactorum levels were sealed and declared off-limits even to senior Mechanicus personnel. This has only fueled speculation about whether the vault remains intact or if its contents were removed under orders from the highest echelons of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Some fear that the vault may still harbor secrets that could one day be weaponized, while others believe it has been destroyed to prevent further temptation. Regardless of its status, the lack of transparency has only deepened the mystique surrounding Graia's darkest hour. Ultimately, the enduring mystery of Captain Demetrian Titus is a testament to the complexity of the Warhammer universe. His story, with all its unresolved threads, invites endless discussion and interpretation. For every answer, there seem to be more questions, and for every theory, a counterpoint emerges. Whether Titus's tale is one of ultimate sacrifice, cosmic horror, or something entirely beyond mortal comprehension, it serves as a reminder that even the most heroic deeds can leave behind shadows that refuse to fade. The legacy of Captain Demetrian Titus and his fateful decision continues to cast a long shadow over the Imperium of Man. Though the battle for Graia saved one of humanity's most vital Forge worlds, the cost of that victory raised unsettling questions about the nature of sacrifice, purity, and survival. As stories of Titus's transformations spread across war fronts and whispered corridors, they became more than a cautionary tale. They became a grim possibility. This has led many to wonder if such a choice could be made again, and if so, by whom. In a galaxy besieged on all sides, countless commanders find themselves facing impossible odds. Some are already hardened by lifetimes of war, and others lead with youthful zeal, believing in their unbreakable faith. Yet every soul has a breaking point, and the question remains: could another make the same bargain as Titus if circumstances forced their hand? Many point to the Ordo Malleus, whose inquisitors routinely confront the unthinkable in their quest to defend humanity. Their encounters with the unknown and their relentless battles against demonic incursions have already shaped them into individuals willing to make ruthless decisions. If pushed far enough, even the most devoted Inquisitor may be tempted to accept power that could save billions, regardless of the spiritual cost. Similarly, some believe that commanders of the Astra Militarum, especially those who have endured wars of attrition, could find themselves in a position where desperation leads to forbidden paths. Those who witness the slow collapse of entire worlds under xenos or chaos invasions often understand the frailty of human defenses better than anyone. In such moments, could a leader, worn down by failure after failure, find themselves willing to sacrifice their humanity if it meant sparing their soldiers and their home worlds? The psychological scars left by wars against impossible foes have created many legends of commanders who walk dangerously close to the edge of damnation. There is also concern that some within the Adeptus Mechanicus may already be teetering toward choices similar to Titus's, though for entirely different reasons. Unlike the mortal leaders of the Imperium, many tech priests do not view the soul as something sacred, but as an equation to be solved. If presented with the opportunity to access unimaginable technological power at the cost of moral purity, some sects of the Mechanicus might see it not as a sacrifice, but as a necessary trade-off. In this sense, Titus's story serves as a dire warning, not just to soldiers and inquisitors, but to those who seek to rationalize sacrifice in the pursuit of progress. In the long term, the story of Titus may serve to shape how future leaders interpret the value of sacrifice. There are two potential futures that this tale may inspire. The first is one of grim pragmatism, where commanders become more willing to make morally ambiguous choices in the belief that victory at any cost is justified. In this timeline, Titus's actions are viewed as proof that the galaxy's horrors can only be countered by extreme measures. This shift could embolden a new generation of leaders willing to bend or break imperial doctrine, risking the erosion of the very values that have held the Imperium together for millennia. The second possible future is one of caution and renewed faith. If the narrative surrounding Titus is framed as a tragic lesson rather than a victorious legend, it could reinforce the Imperium's strict adherence to purity and unyielding resilience. This version of the story would be a warning, a tale of how even the mightiest can fall when they stray from the Emperor's light. In this future, leaders may choose to fight to the bitter end, refusing any temptation to compromise their souls, even if it means losing everything. Such unwavering purity could inspire acts of great heroism, but it could also lead to catastrophic losses if enemies exploit the Imperium's refusal to adapt. Another consequence of Titus's legacy is the growing tension between the different factions of the Imperium. The Ultramarines, known for their adherence to the Codex, are already burdened with the question of whether Titus's actions reflect weakness or strength. If other chapters face similar situations, will they choose to uphold the rigid doctrines of their forebears, or will they be inspired to act independently, believing that victory sometimes requires stepping outside the lines of tradition? The ripple effect could lead to further splintering among the Adeptus Astartes, as some may begin to question whether their loyalty to the Emperor must always align with the ancient codes they follow. From a more spiritual perspective, Titus's story raises disturbing questions about the role of fate and choice. Did Titus's decision reshape the future, or was it always destined to happen? Some imperial theologians argue that this was a test placed before him by the Emperor, a chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength is its capacity for self-sacrifice. Others believe that Titus was manipulated by forces beyond comprehension, caught in a cosmic game where free will was only an illusion. This ongoing debate continues to influence how ecclesiarchy preachers frame the war for Graia in their sermons. To some, Titus was a fallen champion. To others, he was a tragic beacon of hope. In terms of galactic-scale consequences, the events on Graia also have implications for humanity's understanding of technology and its hidden dangers. The Vault's unknown contents and the power that was unleashed have reminded the Imperium that the relics of the past are not always blessings. This has led to renewed purges of Mechanicus sects, suspected of delving too deeply into forbidden knowledge. However, these efforts come with risks. If loyal tech priests are silenced or executed without evidence, the Imperium may lose the very minds capable of preserving its future. Looking ahead, the legacy of Titus raises a haunting possibility. If Graia could only be saved through such a dire act, what might the future hold for the countless worlds still under siege? In a universe where threats grow ever larger, the danger exists that Titus's story will repeat itself. If such a fate could befall a captain of the Ultramarines, considered among the most disciplined of all warriors, who could truly be immune to the temptation of salvation through sacrifice? The galaxy's wars have a way of creating legends, and the line between hero and monster is often drawn after the battle is over. Ultimately, the tale of Captain Demetrian Titus serves as a reminder that survival in the grim darkness of the far future often comes at a price. Whether his actions will lead to a stronger Imperium or sow the seeds of its downfall remains uncertain. But one truth endures. When faced with annihilation, humanity will always look to its champions for salvation, even if that salvation demands a terrible cost. Titus may have been the first to walk that path, but he may not be the last. The echoes of his sacrifice continue to resonate, leaving the galaxy to wonder whether history will judge him as a savior, a cautionary tale, or the harbinger of darker choices yet to come.